this. World War I is over. The Ottoman Empire, this massive, centuries-old power, has just crumbled. And for the Assyrians, an ancient Christian people native to Mesopotamia, this felt like the moment. A chance, after so long, to finally have their own sovereign homeland. But that hope, well, it was about to collide head-on with the cold, hard reality of geopolitics. And this right here? This was the spark. This single sentence from U.S. President Woodrow Wilson's 14 points wasn't just diplomatic talk to the Assyrians, it was a promise. It felt like a green light from the most powerful nations on Earth, a sign that their dream of self-determination was finally being taken seriously. So the stage is set, right after the Great War. You've got empires vanishing, new countries popping up, and the victors in Paris are literally redrawing the map of the world. For groups like the Assyrians, it must have felt like anything was possible. Okay, this timeline really gives us a roadmap of how it all played out. It starts in 1917, when the Russian Revolution pulls Russia out of the war. That's a huge deal because it leaves Great Britain as the main power player in the Middle East. Fast forward to 1919, and Assyrian delegations are in Paris ready to make their case. 1920 gives them a glimmer of hope with the Treaty of Sèvres, but then everything changes in 1923 with the Treaty of Lausanne. That's the one that sealed their fate. So, riding this wave of optimism, different Assyrian communities got organized. They weren't just sitting back and waiting. No, they traveled all the way to Paris to actively petition the Allied powers to argue for their own state and a future they could control. And this was a truly global push. You had delegations coming from the Assyrian diaspora in the U.S., led by Reverend Joel Werda. You had others from Iran and the Caucasus. And so importantly, you had a delegation from the Mesopotamian heartland itself, led by Lady Surma, the sister of their assassinated patriarch. They came from all over, but they all wanted one thing: a homeland. But almost as soon as they got there, they hit a brick wall. And that wall was, for the most part, Great Britain. With Russia gone, Britain was calling the shots, and they immediately started managing the narrative, blocking the Assyrian cause to make sure their own agenda was protected. And let's be clear, these weren't just bureaucratic mix-ups. This was deliberate. The delegation from Iran, they were basically forced to leave Paris. Lady Surma's delegation from Mesopotamia, they were cleverly delayed in London until the conference was already over. Britain essentially became a gatekeeper, making sure the Assyrians never got a real chance to speak for themselves. So you have to ask, why? Why would Great Britain work so hard to sideline the Assyrians at a conference that was supposed to decide their future? Well, the answer had very little to do with people and everything to do with power, control, and a certain black, viscous liquid. Which brings us to this place, the Mosul Vilayet. This was an old Ottoman province, what we now think of as northern Iraq. It was the Assyrian heartland, sure, but it was also home to Kurds, Arabs, and Turkmen. But what really mattered to the British Empire was that it was sitting on a resource that was about to define the entire 20th century: oil. This chart just lays the whole conflict bare. Great Britain wanted one thing: control of Mesopotamia and its oil fields. The new Turkish state wanted to hold on to its old imperial territory. And the Assyrians, they just wanted a safe, autonomous home on the lands they'd lived on for millennia. You can see pretty quickly whose interests were going to win out. You can watch the promise evaporate just by comparing these two treaties. The first one, Sèvres, in 1920, actually had language, Article 62, that provided full safeguards for the Assyrians. But just 3 years later, in the final Treaty of Lausanne, all of that was gone, wiped clean, no specific protections. Minority rights were now just an internal matter for Turkey, with absolutely no international enforcement. And get this, at the very same conference where they were stripping away every last protection, the British Foreign Minister, Lord Curzon, was saying things like this, offering these completely empty assurances of friendly interest and protection. It's just staggering when you think about it. So the Treaty of Lausanne in 1923 really was the final nail in the coffin. It drew the borders of the modern Middle East we know today, and in the process, it officially and completely shut the door on any hope for an Assyrian nation. So what changed between those two treaties? Well, a big part of the answer is the rise of a new, powerful Turkish republic under Mustafa Kemal. His nationalist movement was so successful militarily that it made that first treaty, Sèvres, totally impossible to enforce. It dragged the Allies back to the negotiating table, but this time they were facing a much stronger, much more confident Turkey. The impact on the ground for the Assyrian people was just devastating. Their traditional homeland was carved up. The Hakkari region was given to Turkey. The Nineveh Plains and Mosul were absorbed into the new British-controlled Kingdom of Iraq. Other areas were split between Turkey and French-controlled Syria. A single unified people were suddenly fragmented, turned into minorities in 4 different countries. So the final tally? A complete diplomatic disaster. Their primary goal of a state was denied. Any international protection they might have had was gone, and their entire community was fractured by these new artificial borders. It created a legacy of statelessness and displacement that has led to persecution for decades, and it's something that still affects the Assyrian people to this very day. Which leaves us with this question, doesn't it? The story of the Assyrians after World War I is a powerful and tragic case study. It shows us exactly what happens when lofty ideals about self-determination run smack into the brutal realities of great power politics, a world where oil fields and strategic interests can speak a whole lot louder than promises.